Okay, this video is designed to show you how to extract data from the effort expenditure for reward task from PsychoPy. If you're watching this, I'm assuming that you are one of my final year project students, and so you understand what the effort is and what your hypotheses are, therefore what data you want to extract from the effort. So first and foremost, what you're most likely doing is using the repeated measures ANOVA version of the analysis for the effort. So this is the original effort paper by Michael Treadway and colleagues. You should be familiar with the reference and with the paper. If you've read the paper, or if you think about the paper, you will know that there are two different methods used to analyze the data in this particular study. In general, I encourage my students to use the repeated measures ANOVA because it's a test you're likely more familiar with. The alternative version is the generalized estimating equations. It's my preferred method, but I think it's a bit of a stretch for undergraduate students. So we'll focus on the repeated measures ANOVA and the type of data that you will need for that in this video. So you'll see here that for the repeated measures ANOVA, mean proportions of hard task choices were created for all subjects across each level of probability. Okay, so if we think about this in relation to what your data should look like, we will need something that looks like this. Mean scores or mean hard task choices. So on average, how often participants chose the hard task for each level of probability. And remember, we have three levels of probability: 12%, 50%, and 88%. So that means that you need an average score, three average scores, okay, one for each level of probability for each participant in your study. So the first thing I would recommend doing is setting up your SPSS spreadsheet in this way. So you'll want some basic variables, so the ID that you've used to connect your participants' behavioral data with their questionnaire data, their handedness, so whether or not they're left or right-handed. You'll probably put their age in there as well, and maybe some other demographic details. Then you'll need mean hard task choices for 12%, for 50%, and for 88%. Depending on what we've discussed about your analyses, you might also want to include some other variables here too. I would encourage everybody to include this completed variable, which is just the percentage of trials that each participant completes. So where they, in theory, fill up the little bar. Okay, so when you've done that, you'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 variables here across the screen. And now we have to take your data from the PsychoPy data files and get it into this format. So I'll move this away for now. I'll minimize this. So where do you find your data? So in the effort folder, which you will have used to run all of your PsychoPy experiments, so all of your effort experiments, there's a subfolder called data. If you click on that subfolder, all of your participants' data will be in there. You'll see in general that if you've given your participants a name and you've saved the file according to your participant's name or ID number, each of the files associated with that participant will be saved by name. Otherwise, it will default save to the date that the participant completed the task. So this participant is NE20AD, and we can see that they completed the effort on February 24th, 2020 at 9:12 a.m. So NE20AD actually has 3 participant files. You see that? So they've got a CSV file, which is what we'll look at, a log file, which is a text file, and a SciDate or SciDat file. We'll ignore these 2 pieces of information for now. All 3 files are just different ways of looking at the same data. So we're going to open the .csv file. I would encourage you to open it with Excel if at all possible. Okay, so when you open this file, it looks a little bit overwhelming. and that's fine. So basically there's quite a lot of data here. Sorry, I'm just adjusting this to fit the screen. So there's a lot of data here that you don't need. So the first thing we're going to do is delete these top trials here. And that's because they are just your practice trials. So they're not data that you're going to use in your experiment. What you've got here is the probability that if the participants complete the task, they'll receive the money. And so that appears here in this format, which I have coded behind the scenes in PsychoPy. It appears here in this format, which is the written text, where you'll see 12%, 50%, and 88%. So I would encourage you to highlight this column because you're going to keep it. You want to use this for your data. All of this information here, you can delete. So I'll maybe just talk you through one or two columns. So here, for example, you'll see the trial number. So this takes you from 0 all the way down to however many trials were completed, so 55 in this case. Other data that might be of interest to you here are, let me see. Okay, so this column here, we're just going to go ahead and highlight it because we want to keep this for data. This column here, where you'll see mainly A's and B's, tells you which task the participant selected. So in general, I think B is coded as the hard choice and A is coded as the easy choice. And so this is just telling you whether participants chose B or A on each subsequent trial. You might also be interested in this column here, which is the reaction time. So that's telling you how long on average participants took for each, how long participants took for each decision. So here they thought about it quite a lot before they chose the hard task. Here they very quickly selected the easy task, and so on. This column here we're also going to highlight. So this tells you the number of presses that participants made on each task. So looking at this, you can assume that this is a hard task. They made 100 presses. This is an easy task. They made 30 presses. Here we have the round score. So how many points they earned on that round. And here we have the total score. So this is a running tally of how many points in total they've received. So you can see here 2 plus 0 is 2, plus 3 is 5, and so on. Right here at the very end, we get their handedness, so whether or not they're right or left-handed. We also get their participant ID, the date on which they completed the task, and here the version of PsychoPy they completed the task in. Okay, so now I'm going to start deleting some stuff. So we're not interested in most of this data. So we're just going to select it all the way over to the highlighted column, edit, delete. Okay. We're going to select again all the way to the highlighted column, edit, delete. Again, all the way over, edit, delete. And these final ones here. Okay, I'm going to unhighlight everything. So what does that leave us with? That leaves us with the probability of reward receipt on each trial. It leaves us with which trial the participant selected, the easy one, the hard one. It leaves us with the number of presses the participant made on each trial, the points that they received per trial and in total, their handedness, and their participant ID. So before we go any further, I'm going to do a few data processing steps. So first I'm going to insert a filter on these headings, and that will allow us to look at each of the probability levels in turn. So for example, just 12%, just 50%, and so on. So if we click that for trial select and we remove the blanks, now we have just all the actual trials. I don't know why the blanks come up at the moment. Okay, so the next thing I'd like you to do is go to find and replace and type in none and replace none with 0. Okay, so if something like this happens, it's because there was no record of none recorded in the spreadsheet. Then I want you to press B and replace all the B's with 2's. And then type A and replace all the A's with 1's. Okay, and what you'll see here is that's changed our trial selection data from A's and B's, which are a little bit unwieldy to analyze, to 1's and 2's, which are numeric and therefore a lot easier to analyze. Okay, so now we're going to start filling in your SPSS spreadsheet. So I'm just going to open this here and make the Excel sheet a little bit smaller so you can see what I'm doing if the two are side by side. Okay, so the first thing we'll fill in is the participant's ID. We can literally just copy and paste that. Right. Next thing we'll do is fill in their handedness. So we've coded right-handed as 1 and left-handed is 2. You can see that information here under values in the handedness variable. So you see 1 is equal to right-handed, 2 is equal to left-handed. Okay, the next thing I would do is look at the completion rate. I'm doing this in a slightly roundabout way. So the first thing we're going to do is see what the count is for how many trials there are in total. So this says there are 56 trials in total. So I'd write that number somewhere in your spreadsheet. And then using your filter setting, only look at the 30 and the 100. So this is where there were 30 and 100 button presses made, because we can assume that this means that these are completed trials. We look at the completion rate here and it's 55. So you want to work out what this is as a percentage. So you want to divide 55 divided by 56. So the number of completed trials divided by the total number of trials. And we multiply that by 100 to get a percentage, and you can see that it's 98%. So in our completed column, we pop in 98%. Now we want to get our actual data. So first we will just select, we'll deselect all, and we'll just select the 12% trials. And we're going to get the average number of hard task choices for the 12% trials. So we're quite simply going to calculate the average of all the task choices in that column. And we can see that it's 1.83. 1.83. Okay, and because that number is closer to 2, we can assume that they made more hard task rather than easy task choices on that round. And we do the same thing. So we've selected the 50% trials now. We pop in the average. We select this whole column, 1.85. So remember, we're rounding to 2 decimal places here. Oops, I made a typo, 1.85. And then finally, we're going to go to the 88% trials. Again, we'll type in the average, 1.84. 1.84. Okay, and that's a complete participant's worth of data from their performance on the EEfRT task, which will hopefully be of use to you in your final year project.